Okay. An honored vessel. I want to be an honored vessel in Yahweh's house. It's a privilege and an honor to be used by Yahweh in any fashion. I thank Him for allowing me that chance. But before I can become a vessel at all, there has to be a change in me. Before I can become a vessel, Yahweh has to find me in the pit where I was nothing more than an impure lump of clay. The Bible says in Psalms 40 verse 2, He brought me up also out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock, and established my goings. That's what the potter does when he begins to bring to pass the new creation that he has in mind for me to be. I'm not anything special, but I am a chosen lump of clay. I didn't look any different from all the other clay that was in the pit with me. All around me there were other people, other lumps of clay. We all looked the same. All of us were just dirt, lost in sin, stuck in the mire where there was no escape, for we were all dead lumps of clay with no hope, no future to speak of. Some of those other lumps of clay, at least to my own point of view, would have been a lot better pick for the master's house. They had a lot more to offer than I do. But in Yahweh's sight, He has no respecter of persons. The only thing Yahweh looks for in the clay He chooses is whether that clay will yield itself to His design. And praise Yahweh, He chose me. He chose you too. And Yahweh's hand reached down into that pit, scooped up this old piece of clay, examined it, and says, now here's a lump of clay with promise. He saw something in me and in you that we can't see. There's an old song, and it says it this way: nothing good have I done to deserve God's own Son. I'm so unworthy of the stripes that He bore, yet He chose the road to Calvary to die in my stead. Why He loved me, I can't understand. Roll back those curtains now and then, and remind me, dear Lord, remind that I'm just a lump of clay, and that without Your hand leading me, guiding me, molding me, and making me, I would be nothing more than a useless piece of dirt, unfit for the master's house. The word of Yahweh to the prophet Jeremiah in Jeremiah 18 verses 1 through 4. The word which came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause thee to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheel. The potter was working with some clay. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. He didn't like the way it turned out. So he made it again, another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. He wasn't happy with the way it turned out the first time, so he remolded it to the way he wanted it to be. The clay didn't make the choice to jump into the potter's hand. It was the potter who chose the clay. John 15 verse 16. You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you shall ask of the Father in my name, He may give it to you. Yahweh chose me, and Yahweh chose you. The great potter, making all vessels, and the one who will give honor to whom honor is due, chose us for his house. Who are we to now question what Yahweh wants to do with our lives? Why do we strive against the potter's hands? Why do we think that we know more about ourselves than the potter who formed us, who created us, who molds us and has a design for us? Yet every day I see the clay as it argues with the potter. Yahweh, I can't do what you have called me to do. Mr. Potter, I can't bend that much. I won't stretch that much. I can't stand the pressure. I want to be a vessel. I want to be used, but why does it have to be so hard all the time? Can't you mold me a little easier? Can't you be a little more gentle? After all, I'm just a lump of clay. Well, if you're just a lump of clay, then you need to shut up and let the potter have his way. The clay can't mold itself. A pot doesn't just form all by itself one day. It has to come under the hands of the Creator before it can be anything other than just clay. But somehow we have convinced ourselves that we know more than Yahweh, and we start trying to tell the potter that we know more than he does. Isaiah 29, verse 16. Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he has no understanding? Pick up a handful of dirt and what do you see? Nothing but dirt. If that handful of dirt started arguing with me, I'd be very tempted to do one of three things. I'd either throw it down out of surprise that it had a voice, or I'd slap it a few times to make it quiet. Most likely I'd probably check myself into an asylum somewhere. Who ever heard of dirt arguing with someone? But that's what we do. We are nothing more than a lump of dirt that argues with the Creator who spoke us into existence. That's what I call the height of audacity. Just being lifted out of the miry pit and all the other clay is a miracle of the highest order. But that's the only beginning. That's only the beginning. How many people get saved and yet never become useful vessels in the house of Yahweh? I can tell you that there are a lot of them. In fact, I wonder if the majority of the clay pots in the house of Yahweh are not just there for the looks, because many don't seem to have a real job to do. Or at least they aren't doing it. At the very least, go out and tell somebody what you know and what you believe. Tell somebody about Yahweh and Yeshua. At the very least. If we are going to be honored vessels in Yahweh's house, there has to be a change from our natural condition where Yahweh found us. Yahweh has to get all the hard lumps out of us and make us completely pliable. Even in our natural state, if we find a lump somewhere in our body that we live in, we get concerned because the lump probably shouldn't be there. Sometimes we call it a tumor or a cancer, but it's almost always something that has to be taken care of by the surgeon's life. Yet we come to Yahweh, and when he starts trying to take out the hard-hearted attitudes, the hard-headed way of thinking, the lumps of sin and shame, we often resist his hand in our lives. He's trying to get us into shape to be used, and we are fighting him every step of the way. Sometimes we are too dry, so Yahweh has to water us with a lot of his word so that we can be more pliable. That water of the word often softens the lumps. I've also seen folks who have too much water. What I mean by that is that they become so spiritually minded that they are of no earthly good. They are too slick to work with, and because they think they have arrived, when all the while Yahweh can't get a hold of them, they are sticky and oozing, and you can't get a certain shape out of them. People like that stick to everything, and everything sticks to them. Have you ever had your foot stuck in wet clay? It will hold onto your shoe, and you can hardly pull yourself free. And when you do get free, if your shoe comes out, the clay is stuck to it, and that makes it hard to walk. That's the same effect some old wet believers have on you. You can't get them to turn loose of their own way of thinking. And if you aren't careful, their way of thinking will get hold of you. Yahweh can't change them, you can't change them, and they refuse to change themselves. Yahweh can't make a useful vessel out of a lump of clay that won't yield to His will. The only way that you will ever be an honored vessel in Yahweh's house is to become pliable in His hands. It has to be Yahweh's work in you, nothing that you can do on your own. The Holy Spirit has to lead and teach you. The Word of Yahweh has to keep you watered and pliable, and then you can be formed into the image that Yahweh has in mind for you. Finally, I want to say that being a vessel in Yahweh's house is a glorious thing. But I don't want to just stand around looking nice. I want to be used. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 20, but in a great house there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and of earth, some to honor and some to dishonor. I know there are ornate vases, fine china dishes, and very finely decorated piece of pottery in a lot of homes. And then there are the everyday dishes, like plastic plates or even ceramic cups that are used all the time. Some are there only to be seen, while others are fulfilling the purpose of their existence. All of them bear the marks of their designer, but not all are being used as they were intended. In man's way of thinking, it's the ornate, fine china and the very delicate pieces that are the most valuable. But I believe that in Yahweh's house, it's the common vessels that are honored the most. I want to be used by Yahweh. Yahweh formed us into vessels to be used for a purpose, not just to stand in the corner looking good. It's those vessels that bear the marks of daily service that are the most honored. It's those vessels that have a few chips on the edges, or a cracked handle, or a few scars of battles that give Yahweh glory. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul writes these words in Galatians 6, verse 17, "From henceforth let no man trouble me, for I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Yeshua." Paul was an honored vessel in Yahweh's house. His life gave glory to the potter. He was used like few vessels have ever been used. And yet, he was scarred, battered, and beaten because he fulfilled his purpose. If you are going to be used by Yahweh, get ready for a few battle scars. But if you really want to be an honored vessel, then let Yahweh use you as He wills. Only those vessels that are willing vessels will be honored in His kingdom one day. Those who refuse to be what Yahweh wants them to be will be thrown into the pits forever. I want to be an honored vessel, and I know you do too. Yahweh bless.